SDC Ielts Listening Test 4.
You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet.
Part 1.
You will hear a man telephoning to ask about a job in a hotel. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello, West Bay Hotel. Can I help you?
Oh, good morning. I'm ringing about your advertisement in the Evening Gazette.
Is that the one for temporary staff?
That's right.
The advertisement is for temporary staff, so temporary has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, West Bay Hotel. Can I help you?
Oh, good morning. I'm ringing about your advertisement in the Evening Gazette.
Is that the one for temporary staff?
That's right.
Yes, I'm afraid the person who's dealing with that isn't in today, but I can give you the main details if you like.
Yes, please. Could you tell me what kind of staff you're looking for?
We're looking for waiters at the moment. There was one post for a cook, but that's already been taken.
Oh, right. What are the hours of work?
There are 2 different shifts. There is a day shift from 7 to 2 and a late shift from 4 till 11.
And can people choose which one they want to do?
Not normally, because everyone would choose the day shift, I suppose. You alternate from one week to another.
OK, I'm just writing all this down. What about time off?
You get 1 day off, and I think you can negotiate which one you want. It's more or less up to you, but it has to be the same one every week.
Do you know what the rates of pay are?
Yes, I've got them here. You get £5.50 an hour, and that includes a break.
Do I have to go home to eat, or...?
You don't have to. You can get a meal in the hotel if you want to, and there's no charge for it, so you might as well.
Oh, good. Yes, so let's see. I get £231 a week.
You'd also get tips. Our guests tend to be quite generous.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Is there a uniform? What about clothes?
Yes, I forgot to mention that. You need to wear a white shirt, just a plain one, and dark trousers. You know, not green or anything like that. And we don't supply those.
That's okay, I've got trousers. I just have to buy a couple of shirts. What about anything else? Do I need a waistcoat or anything?
You have to wear a jacket, but the hotel lends you that.
I see. One last thing. I don't know what the starting date is.
Just a minute. I think it's sometime around the end of June. Yes, the 28th, in time for the summer.
That's great. I'm available from the 10th.
Oh, good. Well, if you can call again, you need to speak to the service manager. Her name's Jane Irwin. That's Urwin. And she'll probably arrange to meet you.
OK, and when's the best time to ring?
Could you call tomorrow? She usually starts checking the rooms at midday, so before then if you can, so she'll have more time to chat. I'll just give you her number because she's got a direct line.
Thanks.
It's 832-009.
823-009.
No, 832.
Oh, OK. Yes, I'll do that.
And by the way, she will ask you for a reference, so you might like to be thinking about that. You know, just someone who knows you and can vouch for you.
Yes, no problem. Well, thanks very much for your help.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
SDC Ielts Listening Part 2.
You will hear a tourist information officer explaining local walks to visitors. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to everyone here. I hope you enjoy your stay in our village and enjoy the local scenery. I'll tell you a bit about the forest and mountain tracks in a minute, but first, I'll just give you an idea of where everything is in the village. So, we're here in the Tourist Information Center, and when you come out of the center, you're on Willow Lane, just opposite the pond. If you want to get to the supermarket for your supplies of food and water, go right. That's the quickest way, and then turn right at the top of Willow Lane. And it's the second building you come to, opposite the old railway station. If you're planning on doing some serious climbing and you need some equipment, we do have an excellent climbing supplies store just 5 minutes walk away. Turn left once you're outside the Tourist Information Center. Take Willow Lane all the way up to Pine Street. You want to go left along here. Then keep walking and go up Mountain Road on your right until you come to the next turning on the left. Head down there and you'll come to the climbing supplies store. If you get to the small building that sells ski passes, you'll know you've gone too far. You also need to head to Pine Street for the museum. It's small, but well worth a visit if you're interested in the history of the village and the old gold mining industry. So, when you reach Pine Street from here, you'll see the old railway line on the other side of the road. Turn left into Pine Street and keep going until you come to Mountain Road. And just past here, the museum will be on your left, just behind the railway line. Don't worry about crossing over the tracks. The train stopped running through here in 1985. If you're planning on following one of the easier forest walks, you might like to hire a bicycle. To get to the hire shop, again, you need to head to Pine Street. On the left-hand side of Pine Street, you'll see the town hall. Go down the little road that you come to just before it, and you'll find the bike hire shop just behind the hall. They have a good range of bikes, so I'm sure you'll find something that suits your needs. Last but not least, if you're hungry after a long day's trek, I can recommend our local cafe. Again, when you leave the Tourist Information Center, turn right and follow Willow Lane until it joins Pine Street. And right opposite, on the far side of the railway tracks, is the cafe.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you will have some time to look at the questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the different tracks we have here. All of them start at the end of Mountain Road, and you'll find a parking lot there where you can leave your vehicles. Let's start with North Point Track. It's a gentle route through lowland forest, good for biking and probably the one for you if you have small children. There's a wooden hut where you can stay at the end of the track, but be aware that it's really just an overnight shelter, and you'll need to take your own sleeping bags and cooking equipment. Another option is the Silver River Track. As the name suggests, you'd be following the river for most of the way, and you get to see some of our beautiful native birds. But the track also goes through a densely forested area. Unfortunately, the signposting isn't very good in places, and you do need good map reading skills to avoid becoming disoriented, which happens to visitors a little too frequently, I'm afraid. Valley Crossing will take you through some stunning scenery, but there are several points along the way where you'll need the level of fitness required to get over some pretty big rocks. Stonebridge is one of the shorter tracks, but very steep as it takes you up to the waterfall, and you do need to be in good condition to manage it. Lastly, the Henderson Ridge Track will take you all the way to the summit of the mountain. Do bear in mind, though, that at this time of year the weather is very changeable, and if the cloud suddenly descends, it's all too easy to wander off the track. It's best to check with us for a weather report on the morning you think you want to go. On the way to the summit, there's a hotel which provides comfortable rooms and quality meals, so it's worth climbing all that.
As DC Ielts listening
You will hear
part
a
3.
student discussing his case study with his tutor. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25.
Well, James, I've had a look over your case study, and for a first draft, it looks promising.
I have to be honest, when you told us we had to write about a furniture company, it didn't sound like the kind of thing that would interest me. But since then, I've changed my mind.
Why's that?
Well, as you know, Furniture Rossi is an Australian company, still comparatively small compared to some of the high street stores, but it's got plans to expand into foreign markets, so I chose it for that reason. It's going through a transition. It's a family-run business aiming to build a global brand.
All right, and you've made that clear in your writing. One thing, though, that I think you've overlooked is why Luca Rossi started a furniture company here in Australia in the first place.
Well, he'd just got an arts degree, hadn't he? And people were trying to talk him into an academic profession, but he wanted a practical job, something he thought would be more satisfying in the long run. His grandfather had been a craftsman, he'd made furniture in Italy, and he'd passed this skill on to Luca's father. And, well, Luca thought he'd like to continue the tradition.
Yes, that was the motivation behind his decision. And what was it, do you think, that gave Furniture Rossi a competitive edge over other furniture companies?
I wouldn't think it was price. It's always been at the higher end of the market. But according to my research, it was to do with the attitude of the employees. They were really focused on giving good customer service.
Yes, Luca Rossi insisted on that. Their promotional campaigns also emphasised the fact that the wood only came from Australian forests. But that was the case with their rivals too, so it wouldn't have made them stand out. OK, we'll have a careful look at the content of your case study in a minute, but I just want to make a general comment first before you start writing your second draft.
OK.
Yes, what I'd like to see more of is your opinion. A bit more critical thinking rather than the bare facts. But it's good to see you've been careful with your referencing this time.
Thanks. And I read and reread my work, so I'm pretty sure there aren't any errors with the language.
Yes, it's fine. Oh, but there's one other thing I could probably mention at this point.
Yes?
Well, at the end of term, you'll also be giving a presentation, also on Furniture Rossi.
Yes. I haven't given it much thought yet.
Understandably, but while you're writing the case study, I'd recommend you think about what kind of information would be suitable to use in your presentation. Remember, the last time you gave a presentation on a company, you spent a considerable part of the time providing the audience with financial data. But they probably needed to hear more about company strategy.
Yes. I did concentrate rather too much on the figures. I'll make sure there's a balance this time.
Good.
Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
OK, so let's just think about the content of your case study, the history of Furniture Rossi. I see here in paragraph 4, you're talking about how Luca Rossi raised the capital for his new business venture. And then you're talking about the customer base growing much wider. But what was it that prompted this growth?
Well, that was to do with the quality of the furniture products that the company was selling. People loved that it was all handmade and would last.
And because demand from customers kept growing?
Well, then Rossi needed to take on more craftsmen so they could make sure the orders were ready on time. And then he also had to set up 2 new warehouses to make distribution quicker.
Yes, and from there, the company really grew. But think what happened next. They started looking at ways to increase their profits and called in a consultant. And what he saw immediately was that the infrastructure was completely outdated. They were paying 3 full-time admin staff just for data entry. So he recommended they upgrade their software programs, and that, in turn, cut operational costs and just speeded everything up.
I'm surprised they didn't get onto that earlier. But I suppose Luca Rossi was more interested in the design aspect, rather than the finance side of things.
Yes, I imagine that's why he eventually turned the day-to-day running of the company over to his son. And in fact, it was the son, Marco, who persuaded his father to move on from traditional television advertising and go online instead.
I guess that's the best way to reach people.
It can be, but initially customers actually complained.
Why?
Well, some users found it hard to navigate their way around the website, so they were getting frustrated and giving up. So then the company called in a professional to improve it.
Oh, I see. He must have done a good job. They've had a continuous 3-year rise in revenue, so things must be going well.
Indeed. And what of the future?
Well, I probably need to talk about this a bit more in the concluding paragraphs, don't I? Consumers are already aware of the quality of the furniture, that's for sure. But I think the company is aiming to publicise their values. The fact that they have respect for beauty, durability and functionality and the environment. A lot of companies are already...
Section 4. You will hear a student called Shona giving a presentation on her research report. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
I've been doing some research into what people in Britain think of doctors, the ones who work in general practice, the first call for medical care, and comparing this with the situation in a couple of other countries. I want to talk about the rationale behind what I decided to do. Now, I had to set up my program of research in 3 different countries, so I approached postgraduates in my field in overseas departments, contacting them by email to organize things for me at their end. I thought I would have trouble recruiting help, but in fact, everyone was very willing, and sometimes their tutors got involved too. I had to give my helpers clear instructions about what kind of sample population I wanted them to use. I decided that people under 18 should be excluded because most of them are students or looking for their first job. And also I decided at this stage just to focus on men who were in employment and set up something for people who didn't have jobs and for employed women later on as a separate investigation. I specifically wanted to do a questionnaire and interviews with a focus group. With the questionnaire, rather than limiting it to one specific point, I wanted to include as much variety as possible. I know questionnaires are a very controlled way to do things, but I thought I could do taped interviews later on to counteract the effects of this. And the focus group may also prove useful in future by targeting subjects I can easily return to, as the participants tend to be more involved. So I'm just collating the results now. At the moment, it looks as if in the UK, despite the fact that newspapers continually report that people are unhappy with medical care, in fact, it is mainly the 3rd level of care, which takes place in hospitals, that they are worried about. Government reforms have been proposed at all levels, and although their success is not guaranteed, long-term hospital care is in fact probably less of an issue than the media would have us believe. However, I've still got quite a bit of data to look at. Certainly, I will need to do more far-reaching research than I had anticipated in order to establish if people want extra medical staff invested in the community, or if they want care to revert to fewer but larger key medical units. The solution may well be something that can be easily implemented by those responsible in local government, with central government support, of course. This first stage has proved very valuable, though. I was surprised by how willing most of the subjects were to get involved in the project. I had expected some unwillingness to answer questions honestly, but I was taken aback and rather concerned that something I thought I'd set up very well didn't necessarily seem that way to everyone in my own department. I thought you might also be interested in some of the problems I encountered in collecting my data. There were odd cases that threw me. One of the subjects who I had approached while he was out shopping in town decided to pull out when it came to the 2nd round. It was a shame, as it was someone who I would like to have interviewed more closely. And one of the first-year students I interviewed wanted reassurance that no names would be traceable from the answers. I was so surprised, because they think nothing of telling you about themselves and their opinions in seminar groups. Then one of the people that I worked with got a bit funny. The questions were quite personal, and one minute he said he'd do it, then the next day he wouldn't. And in the end, he did do it. It's hard not to get angry in that situation, but I tried to keep focused on the overall picture in order to stay calm. The most bizarre case was a telephone interview I did with a teacher at a university in France. He answered all my questions in great detail, but then when I asked how much access he had to dangerous substances, he wouldn't tell me exactly what his work involved. It was a real eye-opener.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.